King Gray was a merciless warlord who ruled the world with his power and destroyed nations with bombs after conquering them. Raised as an orphan, he believed in the survival of the fittest and became the strongest in the world. However, one day someone manages to poison him, but instead of dying, he gets reincarnated into another world as a newborn baby. Now he must navigate his way through this new world of magic and adventures. It all begins one day with King Gray finding himself submerged underwater. He slowly starts losing consciousness, but a strange voice echoes through the void and urges him to seek the light in his next life. The next time he opens his eyes, he is greeted by a married couple staring at him like he's some kind of adorable little animal. He looks around in confusion and quickly realizes that these two are his parents, and somehow he has been reborn as a tiny, helpless baby named Arthur Lewin. Arthur keeps wondering how a mighty king like him, who once stood tall with countless victories under his belt, ended up as a tiny, helpless infant who can't even burp properly to ease a bit of indigestion. Alice and Reynolds seem fully convinced that he's their child, but Gray just can't wrap his head around how easily they've accepted that. Now trapped in a body he can't control, he finds himself facing a whole new kind of helplessness, especially when he ends up leaking into his diaper without a clue how to stop it. His fragile form starts feeling more like a prison, making him question if everything around him is just some weird, twisted dream. He soon witnesses his parents using strange abilities that go way beyond anything he's ever seen, and learns that these incredible powers are called magic, something that had never even existed in the world he came from. When his father returns from a hunt, Gray starts realizing that knowledge might just be the most powerful weapon of all. And as he catches sight of the gauntlet strapped to his father's side, he quietly vows to chase power for himself as soon as possible. Then comes nap time, and while at first it feels like another restriction, he slowly starts to find these quiet moments not so terrible, especially when compared to his past life, where rest was a luxury he could never afford, as he was always a target for assassination. As days pass by quickly, little Arthur has now learned how to crawl. His parents light up with excitement, seeing this as he moves around and ends up in front of a mirror, staring at his reflection like he's still trying to figure out what exactly he's become. Later, when his mother puts him to sleep, our guy pretends to doze off and waits for her to leave him alone. Once she's gone, he climbs down from the bed using his blanket and carefully sneaks out. Now that he can barely move his limbs, he slowly makes his way to the library and manages to pull out a book. He starts reading to gather whatever information he can about the world he's now in. What he fails to notice is how an outsider like him is capable of reading the language of this new world. That's when he finds out that the continent he's been reborn into is called Dicathan, which has 3 kingdoms. One of them is the Darv Kingdom, a place which is home to a subterranean nation of dwarves. The second is the Eleanor Kingdom, which, just like it sounds, is home to elves who live quietly inside a forest. Lastly, there's the human kingdom named Sepin, the one he's currently in. Out of the 3, this one seems to be the most populous one, and like the kingdom he ruled in his previous life, it runs on a monarchy system. However, the only difference is that unlike his world where the throne was snatched by force, here it is passed down by birth. Our little baby grabs another book, accidentally bumps himself against the ground, and winces a bit before opening it up to start reading again. This time, he finds out that unlike his old world, this place still feels like it's in its early stages, and most of the technology is pretty primitive. What really sets it apart, though, is the presence of magic and a mysterious energy source called mana. He reads that the ability to control mana is supposedly inherited, and only 1 in 100 people is actually born with a talent. As he scratches his back and lets out a tiny groan from the earlier fall, he quickly gets back to the book without wasting time. He goes on to learn that in this world, mana is mostly used in 2 ways. Augmenters use it to boost their physical strength, which lets them pull off some wild feats normal people couldn't even dream of, while conjurers take a different route by projecting their mana and shaping it with sheer will. Little Arthur starts thinking back to that time Alice used some kind of magic on her father to heal him, which makes him realize that there might be more to this than just those 2 categories. As he keeps going, he finds out that these magic users have something called a mana core, which serves as the key to unlocking all these cool powers, and most people can start accessing them around the time they hit puberty. To awaken as a mage, one needs to channel all the mana flowing through their body into a single point. In his old world filled with tech, there was a different kind of energy called ki, and he notices it actually followed a pretty similar principle of gathering power. Thinking back to all those years of training with ki, he starts wondering if the knowledge from his past life could now serve as his biggest weapon. He gives it a shot by trying to concentrate all his mana into one point, but before he can even make a tiny progress, he is caught by his mother, who scolds him for sneaking off like that. Just as things start to feel intense, little Arthur braces himself, thinking Alice may have figured out his little reincarnation secret, but it turns out all she's concerned about is the fact that he has had a grand moment in his diaper. Arthur refuses to believe it at first, but when he touches his diaper to check, he finds it absolutely mortifying since he'd been so caught up in reading that he didn't even notice his own reflex slipping. Once again, he feels trapped inside this tiny body with an overwhelming desire to break free and get stronger. Time flies, and now it has already been 2 years since Gray was reincarnated. While writing her usual diary, his mother starts getting a little worried as she realizes that for some strange reason their baby boy hasn't smiled even once in all this time. She then peeks out the window and immediately gets outrageous because she catches her husband out there already putting their 2-year-old through training like the kid's preparing for his first battlefield. As she starts yelling at Reynolds with a level of frustration that clearly indicates that she's considering turning him into tonight's dinner, Arthur watches from the side and begins thinking about the power structure of this household. Based on everything he has seen so far, he wonders if it's just this family or if this entire world is ruled by women. Alice brings Arthur along to the city, where he gets all wide-eyed and curious, looking around at everything like it's a treasure hunt. As they pass a weapon shop, his eyes stick to the display, thinking how the types and quality of weapons reveal a lot about this world's tech level. A little ahead, he spots crystals glowing with energy, things he's never seen before. His curiosity shoots up even more when the shopkeeper gives them a small fire magic demo. On their way back, Arthur pretends to be tired and dozes off like a proper infant, fooling Alice into thinking that he's asleep. Even though things seem cozy on the surface, life in this tiny body still feels like a cage, but the love from his parents slowly begins to chip away at that. For someone who grew up in an orphanage with nothing close to a family, this warmth is brand new. While carrying him, Alice gently talks about how happy it makes her when he sneaks out of bed just to read, or how curious he gets at the market. She wonders if he gets that spark from Reynolds and quietly hopes he won't end up like his father and runs away from home in an attempt to explore the world. What she really wants is for him to live a simple life, something calm and free from danger. Later, as little Arthur peeks outside the window, he spots Reynolds training and starts feeling lucky to have someone right at home to learn from. The big guy pours every ounce of strength into his mana core, and just when it looks like he's about to wipe out an entire forest, he casually lifts a few stones before letting them drop, crushing whatever hopes the kid had as he thinks if it would be easier to just pick the rocks up by hand. His mother shows up and instantly catches the look of disappointment on his face, assuring him that his dad can definitely do more than that. Right then, Reynolds decides to get serious and suddenly starts pulling off some slick moves that shake the ground with his kick. Arthur watches in awe and realizes that his dad is actually an augmenter. After the little show, Alice picks Arthur up and tells him that it's nap time now, but the kid reaches his hand out towards a book, clearly itching to read. Alice tries to hold her ground and tells him to sleep like he's supposed to, but the face he makes is so ridiculously cute that she completely breaks and gives in, telling him he can read for just a little. She walks out, leaving him alone with the book, and as soon as she's gone, Arthur begins gathering mana to start forming his core. He recalls how much knowledge he has soaked up in just 2 years, but the most important thing he's learned is the process of creating a mana core. He pushes on with his training and feels like he's just about formed it when a massive blast suddenly echoes through the house and Reynolds bolts in and shields Alice with his body as he leaps away from the explosion. Both parents immediately panic and rush back inside to check on their child, and what they find leaves their eyes wide open. Despite not even being 3, Arthur floats in the air mid-meditation like some glowing tiny spiritual guru, and he has actually managed to awaken his mana core. As the little guy lands with a proud smile on his face and a clear sense of victory, the pieces of the roof he just blew up start raining down on him, and even though he tries to dodge them, he ends up closing his eyes with a desperate will to live. Alice grabs him just in time while Reynolds uses his strength to block the debris and protect them both. It's at this moment that Gray finally starts to understand what it really means to be a parent. Once they see he's safe, both of them burst into tears, and Arthur finds himself confused, wondering why they're crying instead of cheering up. Having grown up in a cold world without warmth or love, these emotions just don't make sense to him at all, but still, he ends up crying too, and this time it comes straight from the heart. Meanwhile, far away, a hideous monster waits in the shadows. Being surrounded by a glowing red aura, it seems to be patiently anticipating the arrival of our boy, like he owes it a candy or something. Taking a peek into his days as King Gray, we see one of the royal servants getting dragged before him after committing the unforgivable crime of attempting to assassinate him. Standing before Gray, the council announces their decision to spare his life, saying that instead of execution, he and his family will be sent back to their homeland. The servant, hearing his child cry in the distance, breaks down and pleads for mercy, begging the king to at least spare his family. He tries to explain how returning home would be a fate far worse than death. He drops down to his knees and makes one last desperate attempt, but the cold-hearted king strikes down his family without the slightest hesitation, while the deranged council calls it an act of true mercy. Luck shattered, the broken man doesn't argue or resist. Instead, he simply lowers his head and thanks the king. Now in his new life, another 2 years have passed by, and Reynolds finally decides it's time to start training his son. He shows up with a custom-made pair of gauntlets just like his own, but Arthur surprises him by choosing a sword instead. In his mind, Gray reasons that with a body this small, if he were to charge in with gauntlets, he'd be dead before even getting close to the enemy. Reynolds grabs a stick and tells Arthur to come at him, and the little guy doesn't hold back, showing off some slick moves. When Reynolds tries to show off by channeling mana into the stick, Arthur gives it a shot too, and somehow gets his sword glowing on the very first try, leaving his dad genuinely stunned. Without wasting a second, Arthur dashes in and shatters his father's stick with a single clean strike, grinning as he asks just how good he's gotten. After seeing what Arthur can do, Reynolds takes him straight to Alice and insists they need to hire a proper teacher. Alice instantly shuts it down, reminding him that he promised to teach their son himself. But Reynolds argues that Arthur's talent is just way beyond what he can handle. When she keeps resisting, he pulls out the broken stick and explains how Arthur snapped it clean even though it was reinforced with mana. That leaves her speechless for a moment, and just when it seems like she's convinced, she hugs her kid tight, refusing to let him go anywhere. The two go back and forth for a while until Arthur jumps in and offers a third option, which is that they could all go together. The parents light up, finding their kid a genius, and immediately start packing. They get thrilled knowing that they have hit a jackpot with such a smart little prodigy. The next day, just as they're about to head out, Arthur gets introduced to their travel companions, which is an old squad known as the Twin Horns Party, his parents used to roll with back in their adventuring days. A red-haired guy crouches down with a big grin and introduces himself as Adam Crunch. Next, a cheerful lady steps forward and shares her name as Angela Rose. Following them are the rest of the group, including Durden Walker, Jasmine Flamesworth, and an elf named Helen Shard. The journey then begins, and Arthur's mommy tells him that it's going to be fun. Arthur nods, though he can't help but find his way of traveling a bit primitive compared to the aircrafts he once soared in his previous life. As they make their way toward Cyrus City, the group stops for a break. Arthur enjoys the ride overall, but is still bothered by the fact that they have to face monsters and threats along the way. While resting, they spot some wild wolves approaching, and the whole team gets ready to take them down. Watching the battle helps Arthur figure out that Adam, Helen, and Jasmine are augmenters like his dad, while Angela and Durden are conjurers. Later that night, while eating dinner, Reynolds tells Arthur to stuff himself up as much as he can since one can't afford to be picky on a journey. Arthur notices something off about his mom, and when he asks, she simply says she's already full. She then spots Reynolds' injured arm and offers to heal him. As she begins, the rest of the team moves out to scout the area and keep watch, giving her the go signal once it's clear. This is because Alice's rare magic isn't something they can afford to let just anyone see. Arthur soon learned that his mother belongs to an extremely rare class of mages known as emitters. Because of how few of them exist, emitters are often targeted, which also explains why Alice and Reynolds have been living far away from towns and cities for so long. After Alice finishes healing Reynolds, Adam asks if he can spar with her son for a bit. Little Arthur gets ready as everyone gathers to watch. Seeing their excitement, Arthur wonders if they've all forgotten that he's just 4 years old. Our boy decides to test how far he's come and gets serious. He channels mana into both his sword and legs, leaving Adam confused about how a kid that small could even pull that off. Before Adam can react, Arthur dashes behind him and kicks off a quick exchange. Their mini-battle ends with Adam going all in and knocking Arthur off his feet, but before the boy can hit the ground, a wind magic spell catches him mid-air and sets him down gently. Helen scolds Adam for not holding back against a kid, but Adam insists the little monster is no ordinary child and wonders what kind of hellish training he's been through. Jasmine, someone who usually keeps to herself, walks over and asks Arthur to teach her the technique he used on his legs. After that, the journey rolls on and little Arthur finds it surprisingly smooth. They make more stops along the way, and during each one, Arthur gets the chance to train a bit and pick up something new from each of the squad members. Along with learning, he also shares his own method of leg enhancement with Jasmine and notices she's actually catching up to him pretty fast. As the days pass, Jasmine starts opening up to Arthur and even ends up gifting him a small blade with a secret thread on it. At one of the stops, Arthur catches his mom feeling a bit nauseous and wonders if she's hurt, though she assures him she's completely fine. The journey stays peaceful until a bunch of bandits suddenly attack them. Everyone quickly gets into position to defend themselves, but the sheer number of enemies clearly outmatches their small group by a huge margin. The bandit leader yells out to spare the women and kids since they won't fetch a good price if they're injured. Right after that, the bandits begin their assault on the order of their nasty leader. As the fight kicks off, the Twin Horns party along with Arthur's dad start pushing back, but even though they're strong, they're starting to wear down since they're just too outnumbered. Just then, Reynolds gets hit and crashes straight into the carriage, where his family's hiding. Alice comes rushing out to heal him, but Reynolds stops her, warning that things could get even worse if the enemy finds out what she can do. He then turns to his son and tells him to grab his mom and get as far away from here as possible. But the little guy isn't having it and argues that he's not useless either and wants to fight alongside him. That's when Reynolds reveals the truth, telling Arthur that his mother has a baby inside of her belly and that he has to protect her no matter what. That finally clears up all the times Arthur had seen his mom looking sick along the way. Reynolds calls him Big Brother and hands over the job of guarding his mom. Following his dad's words, Arthur activates his mana and starts sprinting away with Alice. Meanwhile, his dad stays behind to serve as a decoy, throwing everything he's got at the enemy boss so his family can make it out alive. As Arthur keeps running with his mother, two bandits suddenly block their way, but before they can do anything, Jasmine and Adam show up and take them down without hesitation, telling Arthur to leave the bandits to them. Even Helen joins in, firing off an arrow that strikes down another one trying to stop him. Arthur pushes forward with memories of the countless lives he once took as grave flashing through his mind, and now here he is, on the other end of that predator-prey chain, running not as the hunter, but as the hunted, trying to protect the soul that's his own. Just then, the conjurer mage catches sight of him running off with his mother and launches a wind spell straight at them. Arthur reacts on instinct and shoves his mom aside to shield her, but the blast catches him head-on and sends him flying off the cliff. While falling, he refuses to let the conjurer bandit get away and uses the dagger with the secret thread Jasmine had gifted him to hook onto the guy and drag him down with him. Angela and Durden give it everything they've got trying to save Arthur using their spells, but unfortunately their magic doesn't reach in time. His mom screams out his name as he falls, but the boy is already going down. As he drops down and down, Arthur feels something strange stir inside him, completely powerless in that moment, yet oddly at peace as he finally understands what it truly means to protect someone with all your heart. In that moment, he realizes what the royal slave who got punished for a murder attempt must have felt back then when his own family was annihilated right in front of him. It finally clicks why his parents shed tears for him and why they would never regret choosing his life over theirs. Tears stream from Arthur's eyes as he remembers that he was supposed to be a big brother, but now that dream might never come true as he plummets down ready to kick the bucket for good. But somehow, against all odds, Arthur wakes up and finds himself still in one piece, lying inside a forest filled with thick, foggy miasma. He opens his eyes, dazed and confused, trying to figure out where he even is. That's when a thunderous sound of footsteps echoes around him, making him scramble up and panic to check it out. Right in front of him stands a huge, terrifying monster that nearly scares the life out of him, only for it to casually greet him with a cheerful good morning. Just then, the story suddenly rewinds to a moment with a little girl talking to a lady about finding something pretty, insisting that she might not be able to find it again if she loses it now. One of their voices sounds eerily familiar, almost identical to the one Gray had heard during the moment he was ice-caged into this completely different world of magic. Jumping back to the present, Arthur finds himself face to face with the hideous monster standing right in front of him. He feels scared by her form and wonders how he even ended up in this place, but what bothers him more is the thought of whether this monster is actually trying to lure him into something. Trying to figure out the creature's intentions while also wanting to protect himself, Arthur leaps in to attack her, only to get flicked away by just 2 of her fingers and slams straight into the ground. To his shock, the creature knows his name and tells him he still has a long way to go, instantly making him realize that he doesn't stand a chance against her. The terrifyingly overpowered monster casually reveals that she's actually his ally, which leaves the poor guy more confused than ever. She then walks over to a tree with golden glowing fruits hanging from its branches, picks a few, and brings them to him, telling him to munch on them even if he doesn't feel hungry, since he's going to need the strength to heal and move around properly. Right then, Arthur tries shifting his body and hears a horrible crackling sound followed by a burst of sharp pain that makes him cry out loud. The beast tells him he should be grateful for surviving such a fall in one piece, which at least makes him stop crying for a moment. She then urges him again to eat the fruit and to make it more convincing, warns that she won't answer a single question if he doesn't. Arthur gives in and starts eating, quickly munching through a large portion thanks to his raging hunger. As he is done eating, memories of his mother and father come rushing in, and he asks the creature if she knows whether they're okay. She replies that while she's somehow bound to this place and can't leave it, her abilities allow her to see a little beyond its borders. Using her powers, she shows Arthur the fallen bandits and informs him that his family is safe and managed to escape. Hearing that they're all right overwhelms Arthur with emotion, and tears roll down as he smiles and thanks the monster again and again. Just then, the creature finally reveals her name as Sylvia, and it becomes clear that she herself seems to be wounded badly. Days go by and Arthur continues eating and slowly regaining his strength under the watchful eye of a beast that looks like it could devour anything in sight. Even though he's mostly healed and eager to return home, Sylvia explains that he can't leave just yet. Apparently, they're on the outskirts of Elshire Forest, which happens to be a dangerous place crawling with wild beasts and thugs who wouldn't hesitate to rob travelers or sell kids like him into slavery. Still, Sylvia assures him that she's working on a plan to get him out safely. She understands how much he wants to reunite with his family, but creating a dimensional portal takes time and preparation. While she handles that, Arthur picks up a branch and starts practicing his swordsmanship to keep himself busy. Watching him move, Sylvia encourages his training, saying it's good for his developing body and would help him stay healthy as he recovers. Despite everything, she hasn't mentioned a word about herself or her worsening condition. For all of her terrifying appearance, Sylvia proves to be a warm and gentle soul deep down. Arthur keeps at his training, and seeing him gathering his mana surprises Sylvia with how quickly he's progressed, especially when she realizes he's already formed a mana core at his age. Getting impressed, she shows him an even more advanced technique and asks if he knows how to use it. Arthur stares in awe and replies that she's collecting mana while casting it at the same time, comparing it to fueling an aircraft mid-flight. He can't wrap his head around how someone could even pull that off. Sylvia goes on to explain that people tend to hold a rigid idea about mana, where they see collecting and using it as 2 separate things, while mana beasts like her are already used to handling both at the same time without trouble. She compares it to something as natural as breathing, and then asks if he wants to learn it too. When she notices how fired up the kid looks, she follows up by asking how he would use it if he actually managed to learn the technique. As soon as he responds by saying he would destroy everyone who dares to take his loved ones away, she instantly tells him that he's failed. Arthur gets worked up and argues that it makes sense to wipe out anyone who threatens his family, remembering how this mindset was exactly what helped him rise as the most powerful king his world had ever seen. Sylvia calmly helps him realize that his thoughts always revolve around cutting down his enemies, and then she slowly raises a sharp nail toward him, pointing out that while she could tear him apart with that same hand, she could also use it to touch him softly, and then asks him which one he would rather receive. Just as expected, the nervous boy chooses the gentle option. After trying to guide his thoughts in a better direction, she lightly pats his head and says she didn't save his life just so he could live it by hurting others without purpose. For a brief second, Arthur wonders if Sylvia said all of this because she somehow knew about the life he had before, but then he brushes the idea aside, figuring there's no way that could be possible. The monster lady asks the boy once again what he would do if he ever became stronger, and this time he takes a moment to think back on the warm memories he shared with his friends and family before answering with a serious expression that he wants to protect the people he loves and truly cares about. Hearing this, the monster finally tells him that he has passed. At the same time, somewhere else, another creature who looks strikingly similar to Sylvia is seen actively tracking her down, and without wasting a moment, he soars into the sky. The story rewinds once again to Arthur's former life as Gray, where he steps out of his room and heads into the Prime Minister's office, greeted with a humble welcome. Gray silently stares at the wall, reflecting that he is nothing more than a king in title, while the real power lies with the Parliament. As his eyes land on his own portrait hanging there, he bitterly thinks of himself as nothing more than a weapon and a tool crafted solely for war. Even the Prime Minister, a man named Marlon, proudly praises him for leading countless victories and bringing both wealth and honor to their nation. Marlon then stands and walks over, asking the king why he came, but without offering a single answer. Gray simply turns and walks away. Back in the present, Arthur continues his training under Sylvia, who now shows him how to gather mana while using it at the same time. She lets him know that if he manages to master this technique, his magic capabilities will grow significantly. Taking her advice to heart, Arthur chooses to go at it slowly, understanding that rushing the process would only end in failure. His thoughts drift back to his past life where he once battled a giant guy wearing a pig-shaped helmet, and he remembers how he had controlled Kai. Using that same focus here, he finally succeeds, smiling with satisfaction as the mana flows just right. He is overwhelmed with joy as he rushes to hug Sylvia, but the monster quickly hides him behind some nearby rocks and warns him to stay silent. Arthur watches as another creature, looking just like Sylvia, appears. Sylvia calmly tells him she hadn't expected he'd be able to find her, and the creature responds that her blood scent had given her away. He urges her to come with him, but when she refuses, he begins threatening her, saying that if she resists, he'll be forced to take her by force. He then launches a dark attack that knocks Sylvia to her knees. Arthur panics but hears Sylvia's voice in his head through telepathy, reassuring him not to worry. As the big bad monster keeps taunting her, Sylvia taps into her hidden strength and breaks free, shedding her disguise to reveal a majestic, Pegasus-like dragon beneath. The big bad monster now looks genuinely alarmed, and as she charges at him, he warns that using such power would cut her life short. Sylvia calmly replies that while she would miss this life dearly, she wouldn't mind dying as she's already lived a happy one. Just as it seems like she has the upper hand, the dark monster fires off a devastating barrage of dark energy, and Sylvia starts to worry about Arthur's safety. As the enemy prepares another blow, she unleashes her strongest magic and freezes time. Calling out to Arthur, she tells him to come forward, revealing her true form in all its glory, and with the flair of a human girl who lives for compliments and praise, proudly demands that someone acknowledge just how stunning and remarkable she is. Without wasting a second, she opens an interdimensional rift and explains that it connects to a faraway location and asks if he'll be alright on his own. She once again reminds him to use his powers wisely, and when Arthur gives her the answer she hoped for, she presents him with a glowing oval-shaped object and tells him to wrap it in her feather and protect it carefully. She also grants him a mysterious power that marks his arms with glowing patterns similar to her own. As the time to say goodbye finally arrives, Sylvia admits that she could have sent him home from the very beginning but chose not to, simply because she had so much fun spending time with him. Arthur clenches his fists and starts crying, realizing that his strength is still too small to protect the one who meant so much to him. Before leaving, Arthur realizes just how much his time here has changed him. He says that he doesn't care whether Sylvia is a monster or a dragon because to him now she feels like family. When Sylvia gently reminds him that he already has a mother, our guy instantly calls her his grandma, which makes her light up with joy as she asks him to say it again. With a smile, she pushes him into the interdimensional rift. As he floats through it, Arthur looks back and asks if she can come with him, but before he gets an answer, the portal pulls him away to the other side. After he vanishes, Sylvia looks visibly heartbroken and turns toward the big bad monster, resuming the flow of time as the battle continues. The devastating attack stopped by the flow of time strikes at her, and she crashes to the ground. Pretending to be defeated, she tricks the enemy into thinking she's dead. The moment he approaches, Sylvia's eyes snap open as she ambushes him with a brutal counterattack that leaves him no chance to defend himself. The resulting blast shakes the entire forest with a massive explosion. Right after, the story jumps to that same strange realm from before, where a figure who appears to have the same voice as Sylvia's is seen speaking with a girl, thanking her and leaving the rest of the mission in her hands. Meanwhile, as Arthur drifts through the interdimensional space, he suddenly hears Sylvia's voice echo around him. She gently asks if he remembers what she told him, and Arthur nods, admitting he feels incredibly sad. Sylvia urges him to carry these feelings with a smile and to take everything one step at a time. Arthur struggles to accept that this is real, but is shaken when he realizes Sylvia had known all along about his past as the strongest king in his world. Before her voice fades, she tells him to never let his heart be consumed by anger or hatred and wishes for his new life to be filled with the blessings of light. Arthur then wakes up to find himself lying in the middle of a quiet forest. Tears slip down his cheeks as the weight of Sylvia's absence sinks in. He slowly sits up, brushing his face and reaching for the glowing item she gave him, carefully placing it into his bag like it's the most precious thing he owns. Just then, he hears something in the bushes behind him and quickly turns around to see what it was. The voice Arthur hears sounds like a girl's scream and instantly makes him think that someone's in danger. He doesn't waste a second and boosts his legs with physical enhancement and dashes after the sound. Arthur leaps onto a tree and checks the glowing item Sylvia gave him, making sure it's safe before quietly securing it back in his bag. Then he literally becomes Mowgli from the Jungle Book as he springs from branch to branch, flying through the treetops until he finally reaches the source of the commotion. There he spots a group of slave traders who have captured a young elven girl with gray hair and are busy arguing about how much they could get for her on the market. The moment he hears them talk about selling her off, he recalls the bandits who tried to do the same to him and the women during that ambush on their journey. The thugs ruthlessly toss the little girl into a carriage, and while the sight nearly makes Arthur lose control, he manages to steady his nerves by recalling Sylvia's teachings. He keeps trailing the slave traders as they continue moving, and once the sun begins to set, the group finally stops to set up camp. Arthur stays hidden and waits, hoping they might lead him into a human town, giving him a better chance to intervene. However, when he overhears their conversation about the vile and twisted things they plan to do to the helpless girl before selling her, it hits him that he can't afford to wait any longer, though he still chooses to sit in a calm yoga posture, silently waiting for the darkness to set in. As night falls, his eyes shift toward the horned wolves tied near the camp, and he begins to wonder why these beasts are following the slavers without even a hint of resistance. That's when he spots the magic, which instantly explains everything. The sight sparks an idea in his mind, and without wasting time, he tosses a few stones toward the wolves, triggering a commotion. The thugs quickly grow anxious, fearing the noise might draw unwanted creatures from the forest, so they send one of their own to go shut the wolves up. Arthur's plan works, and he charges his fist with a bright red mana before slamming it straight into the guy's face, knocking him out cold. He pulls out his dagger, hiding just before the next fake-ass thug comes to check on his missing partner. The thug casually jokes about the guy possibly taking a piss somewhere, but the moment he sees him lying on the ground unconscious, it's already too late. Arthur catches him off guard, slicing the thug down before he can even react. Then comes the third one, wandering and clueless, and Arthur launches forward with a quick dash, slicing across his leg and leaving him injured. The injured thug yells out to his boss, warning him to be cautious as the boy attacking them appears to be a kid mage. This immediately piques the leader's interest, and he starts seeing Arthur not as a threat, but as a golden goose that just walked into his camp. The leader throws away his weapon and gathers mana before lunging, hoping not to make the kid kick the bucket. But to his surprise, Arthur dodges the attack with ease, and as the guy tries to follow through, Arthur counters by dashing behind him and using his dagger with a thread tied to it, trying to restrain the thug's movements. Unfortunately, the leader manages to grab hold of the weapon, yanking Arthur toward him before slamming the boy aside with a brutal kick and pinning him down with his legs. Arthur swiftly condenses fire magic and burns through the thug's leg, breaking free. This gets the thug furious, and he finally gives up on capturing Arthur alive and prepares to finish him off for good. But before he can make his move, Arthur drives his blade straight into the thug's head, ending him instantly. That just leaves the last surviving thug, who stumbles backward and immediately begins begging for his life, realizing he has no chance of escaping alive. After dealing with the thugs, Arthur rescues the girl, but quickly notices something odd about her. He gently tells her that she's free now and can go back home. The little elven girl notices the bruises on his arm and asks if he's hurt. That simple question makes Arthur pause, realizing that it's the first time he's spoken to someone his own age. He asks her to wait for a moment, then moves to hide the thug's bodies so she won't be scared, telling her that there are things kids shouldn't see. The girl frowns and points out that he's a kid too, but Arthur doesn't respond much. When she asks what happened to the thugs who kidnapped her, he quickly comes up with an excuse that they got caught in some kind of accident. Just as he's about to leave, the girl hesitates and admits she's scared, asking if he's really going to leave her alone. Arthur asks if the elven forest isn't safe for her, and she explains that her parents warned her about a tree ghost that would eat her if she wandered too far by herself. He asks where she came from, and she points in the opposite direction of his path. She explains she was chasing some bugs and got lost. Thinking back to his own days as an orphan, Arthur decides not to abandon her. His gaze shifts to the wolves still tied near the camp. For a moment, he considers finishing them off since he doesn't know how to control them. But before he can react, the girl argues they should release the wolves back into the forest or else they might die here. She then takes off the magic items from the wolves while Arthur keeps worrying that they might turn on him any second, but despite that, he decides to walk with her to make sure she gets home safely. They keep moving until the sun finally rises, and when they stop to eat, the girl finally introduces herself as Tessia Eralith. Arthur offers her his dried meat soaked in salt, which ends up tasting terrible to her. Not that Arthur cares, since to him, food is only about survival and nutrition, while the girl, being a full-on kid, reacts exactly how any spoiled little brat would. When Tessia asks why he came to the Elshire forest, our boy simply says he got separated from his family, which leads her to assume that she is not alone in being lost. Arthur asks her about the kingdom of Eleanor and what her life is like. Tessia explains that her parents are always busy, so she usually just spends time with her servants and her grandfather. As they continue walking, Arthur finds that there are no proper roads leading to the kingdom, and just then, he notices a bunch of fireflies glowing around Tessia, who starts playing with them and even slaps one onto Arthur like it's some kind of earring. When she talks about wanting to train under a master after her core awakens, Arthur gets curious and asks about their teaching system, but it turns out the girl doesn't have a clue. As they keep going, Arthur senses that someone's following them and quickly realizes that it's one of the horned wolves from earlier. He regrets not finishing them off when he had the chance, but with night falling, the two decide to set up camp. Arthur tells Tessia to get some rest while he stands guard outside, and while checking the items Sylvia gave him, Tessia suddenly calls out, asking if he doesn't need sleep too. She steps out of her tent, saying that even though her grandfather warned her not to sleep near boys, she's willing to make a one-time exception and promises not to snitch. Arthur resists the idea, but she keeps coming up with excuses, eventually dragging him inside and asking him to stay alert while being there with her. Once inside, it becomes pretty clear that the only reason she wanted him close was because she was scared and wanted someone next to her in case she needed to go to the bathroom. Out of nowhere, Tessia brings up a weird topic, asking if all men are pervs with tons of wives, which of course sounds exactly like something her grandfather would have said. Arthur quickly disagrees and says he's pretty sure elf men are just as bad, then asks if she even knows what a perv even is, but before he can explain anything, the girl ends up falling asleep, completely worn out from their journey. They then continue their journey the next day, moving across all sorts of terrain as Arthur starts growing more restless, with every step worried about his family and desperate to see them again. Out of nowhere, he begins to feel a sharp, unbearable pain in his mana core, and Tessia, seeing him struggle, instantly runs off to find herbs that might help. The pain doesn't ease much, and to make it worse, the intervals between the waves of agony keep getting shorter. Just when Arthur feels completely drained, the same horned wolf from earlier appears again, and given everything he's been through, our boy instantly assumes it's a threat. But to his surprise, the creature simply walks up and drops an animal as some sort of gift, clearly trying to return the favor. Tessia watches the scene and calls it a reward for being a good kid, which honestly sounds like another one of those things her fancy grandpa would say. Later that night, Arthur cooks the meat and finds it surprisingly tasty, but then Tessia tries to be generous and hands him some mushrooms, saying it's a special cuisine for women in her region. The stuff doesn't sit well with Arthur at all and ends up giving him a terrible stomach. Once they crawl into the tent, Tessia starts chatting about herself, saying she's used to reading a book before bed and wants to travel the world to see the places she's always loved reading about. But before she can get too far into her little dream, this time it's our King Grey, who knocks out instantly, completely worn down by the intense pain he had to endure all day, so Tessia simply gives him a blanket and falls asleep beside him. The next morning, as they keep moving, the pain Arthur's been feeling refuses to fade even a little, and though Tessia apologizes after seeing him struggle, he tells her not to worry since they're almost at her kingdom anyway. Being stuck in Kid's body, Arthur can't help but feel irritated by how powerless it makes him feel. Tessia then mentions how close the two of them have gotten lately and asks if she can call him Artie and officially be friends, to which Arthur simply replies that he doesn't mind. His short answer makes her nervous, so Arthur tries to lighten the mood by saying that as a humble country boy, he's honored to be called Artie by the noble Lady Tessia Eralith, which instantly earns him an eye roll as she clearly finds the old man joke annoying. Not letting it end there, Arthur tosses the teasing right back at her by pointing out how she's a scaredy cat who can't even go to the toilet alone. Her Highness Tessia gets flustered and insists she thought of him as a friend. Just then, she suddenly says she sees something, but Arthur barely looks, thinking she must have spotted some random leaves or fireflies again, until they both notice a glowing entrance inside a tree, shining with a greenish aura. Tessia lights up with excitement, saying they finally arrived, and reaches her hand out toward him, asking him to come along. Once they pass through the teleportation gate, the two immediately find themselves surrounded by guards who grab Arthur and raise their swords at him. He calls out for Tessia in confusion, but she just stares back at him with an angry glare, making it look like things have suddenly taken a very wrong turn for our poor guy, who now starts wondering if the girl might actually be evil. As the tension in the air builds and it starts feeling like game over for our boy, Arthur blames himself for letting his guard down just because of Tessia's innocent act. He yells at her, but the girl just stands there silently, staring at him while the elven soldiers seriously consider ending him right there. Frustrated and furious at his own gullibility, Arthur starts sinking into memories from his past life, regretting how easily he trusted her. Just then, the soldiers raise their voices again, calling to kill him, but this time Tessia shouts for them to stop and quickly steps in front of Arthur, trying to shield him and begging them to let him go. The Knight Commander argues that Arthur is still a human and could pose a threat to their lives, but Tessia fires back, saying he's not dangerous at all and even saved her from some thugs. That only makes the guard leader angrier as he lashes out, convinced that Arthur must have used some kind of brainwashing trick on the young princess. But before anything worse can happen, a green light flickers in front of everyone and an old Gramp steps out of a portal, calmly telling the soldiers to let the kid live. Tessia immediately rushes back to Arthur's side, checking if he's okay while throwing some harsh words at the guards for overreacting. The old man, who turns out to be Tessia's grandfather and apparently the one responsible for stuffing her head with all sorts of random nonsense, chimes in, saying the soldiers' reaction was understandable, especially when they found their missing princess suddenly returning with a human, someone they still think of as a wild, dangerous creature. The Gramps introduces himself to Arthur as Virion, the former king of Eleanor and Tessia's grandfather, and personally thanks him for saving their princess. Arthur stands there in disbelief, completely stunned by the fact that he had unknowingly been traveling with actual elven royalty this whole time. Seeing Arthur's shocked reaction, Virion turns to Tessia and asks if she really hadn't told him anything. Just then, Tessia's parents, the current king and queen, call out her name and the little girl bursts into tears, running straight into their arms. Her father catches sight of Arthur and immediately assumes he's a threat, commanding the guards to take him down at once. But Virion steps in calmly, explaining that while Arthur may be a human and yes, even a bit of a barbarian in their eyes, he's also the one who saved their daughter and brought her home. Tessia agrees and steps between Arthur and her father, holding her arms out protectively as she pleads with him not to harm the boy who saved her life. She even asks her father to invite Arthur to the castle as a guest. Tessia hurries over to Arthur with a big smile and holds out her hand, inviting him to join her for some royal cuisine at the castle. She looks back at her dad with those pleading eyes no father could ever say no to, and with a reluctant sigh, he gives in. Once that's settled, Virion leans toward Arthur and tells him to come see him later. Arthur can sense something strange and powerful about the old man, and judging by his current situation, it's not like he's in any position to say no. Right then, the little princess grabs Arthur by the hand and pulls him along with her. As they walk, Arthur can't help but admire the beauty of Eleanor with its lush scenery and unique architecture. But of course, the people around aren't exactly throwing him a welcome party. They glare at him with eyes that scream asterisk, you don't belong here, asterisk. That cold reception reminds Arthur of what he once read about the long-standing tensions and wars between humans and elves, and it's clear those wounds haven't healed. Still, he never imagined he'd end up seeing such a strange city with an even stranger princess who couldn't act less like royalty if she tried. What bothers him, though, is the harsh look she gave him back at the gate, the one that made him question whether she turned on him. As that thought lingers, his mana core flares up with another painful throb, a not-so-gentle reminder that something's still not right inside him. So for now, he decides to keep his guard up. Back at the castle, the maids gather to greet the princess, and Tessia proudly introduces Arthur as her savior, telling them he's a good human and ordering them to treat him with their best hospitality. While the little girl cheerfully throws out ideas about what they should do next, Arthur spots her parents standing nearby and politely asks if he could talk to them about everything they've been through so far. The king, still a bit suspicious, agrees and leads our boy to a table, ready to hear what he has to say, though his face makes it clear he's not letting his guard down just yet. Arthur stands like he's about to deliver some grand speech and politely asks if it's alright for Tessia to be present during the talk. Tessia raises a brow, finding it weird that he's standing there like some servant, and quickly tells him to sit down with them. Once he's finally seated, he casually asks for some snacks, clearly treating this like it's going to be a cozy little storytime session. The sus royal family finally gets around to introductions. Tessia's father steps up first, introducing himself as Alduin and the queen as Muriel. Arthur returns the gesture with a respectful bow, explaining that he was born in a small, poor village in the kingdom of Sepin. He adds that he's genuinely grateful for the chance to sit beside royalty, especially when he's just a simple commoner. Alduin comments that Arthur seems surprisingly well-educated for someone claiming to come from a poor background. Arthur realizes he might have overdone it with the formality, but deep down he knows that if he'd acted like a typical kid, these people probably wouldn't have taken him seriously at all. Once he's given the green light to speak, Arthur begins explaining everything, though he carefully skips over the part about being separated from his family. But while talking, he notices something strange. Alduin's expression starts to shift the moment he brings up Tessia. When Arthur finally mentions that it was slave traders behind her abduction, the king's composure cracks and he erupts in anger, throwing blame at the human race entirely. Arthur quickly steps in, defending humanity by arguing that being a slave trader isn't tied to any particular race. It's a choice, not a trait. Virion then speaks his mind, questioning how a little kid like Arthur could have been capable of saving his granddaughter from the slave traders. He asks if Arthur begged them or bought her off, to which Arthur replies that while he may be a kid, he's also a mage. Virion asked again to confirm, and Tessia, standing up with excitement, declares that she knew it. However, the elves remain unconvinced. One of the guards draws his sword, treating this revelation as a joke. He accuses Arthur of tricking the princess in order to sneak into their land and even the royal palace. Virion silences the guard, warning him for the second time to sheath his blade. Tessia also stands up for Arthur, explaining that she was indeed kidnapped by the slave traders and even overheard them talking about selling her. As any mother would, the queen quickly hugs her daughter, relieved that she's safe and sound. Surprisingly, it's the king who speaks up first, saying he believes Arthur's story. Just then, Arthur presents him with a question. He argues that he was stranded by the bandits, separated from his parents, and now only wants to return to Sapin to reunite with them. As expected, the king gets angry again, which now looks like it's simply part of his routine, and then asks if Arthur wants to go home as a reward for saving his child. He further argues that he despises all humans, and even though Arthur knows this, he's still asking for a favor. Arthur, feeling bold, fires back, accusing the elves of behaving like the same barbarians they claim humans to be. Such a line could have easily gotten him slain, but Virion steps in, telling his son that Arthur has him in checkmate. Even Tessia gives her father a death stare, making it clear that the king has no choice but to help Arthur. The king clears his throat and explains that the portal to Sapin can only be opened once every 7 years, and even then, it requires approval from several of their leaders. He further informs Arthur that the next time it could be opened will be in 5 years. This worries Arthur, but the king reassures him, stating that he cannot keep a human here for that long and will arrange for his soldiers to escort him home. Arthur, feeling relieved, thanks him, but just then, a sudden wave of pain strikes him, one so intense that it even catches Virion's attention. Arthur decides to rest and, while taking a bath, recalls Sylvia, wondering what he should do about this persistent pain. After freshening up, he steps outside for some fresh air, contemplating how to find the source of his pain and eliminate it. As he walks around, he spots Tessia with her family and, for a moment, hopes that his own parents are safe as well. The only thing he can do is hope that they somehow survived. Tightening his fist, he wonders if they would greet him with a smile. Arthur stands up and begins to move, while Tessia quickly rushes over to him. He teases her a bit, but the little girl apologizes on behalf of her family for their rudeness towards him. Arthur dismisses it, telling her that it's just their way of showing they were worried about her, and advises her that she should embrace being a spoiled little princess, but also be responsible. Standing beside her, he asks if his parents would be happy to reunite with him. Upon seeing his gloomy face, Tessia pinches his cheek and tells him they definitely would, as even she misses him, even though he's still right there. Just then, fireflies appear again, and Arthur is reminded of some of his memories, realizing that he's been fighting his past and getting swallowed by darkness. He apologizes to the princess, telling her that he's sorry for acting this way. Suddenly, one of the fireflies darts toward them, and Arthur, thinking it might be an attack, quickly steps on it before leaping to grab it. He tries to kick it, but before he can, Virion appears before him. Arthur shouts at him, asking if he's trying to hurt his own granddaughter, to which Virion calmly responds, asking if a mere firefly could actually do any harm. Arthur opens his hand, realizing that Virion is right. The old Gramps actually used this moment to test Arthur's skills, and now he's certain that Arthur really did defeat the slave traders on his own. Tessia steps in, telling the big guy to stop bullying her bestie, but the old man simply forges a wooden sword, claiming he hasn't encountered such an interesting person in a long while. He rushes toward Arthur, securing his granddaughter in a safe location. He tells Arthur to come at him, getting intrigued by his skills, but it becomes clear that the old guy is no match for him. Arthur tries to keep up, but the man easily breaks his sword. Arthur then finds an opening and tries using his fire magic, only for it to be blocked once again. But Arthur finally manages to land a single hit on the old guy, earning his acknowledgement and setting the stage for the second round. Before that can happen, Tessia pinches Arthur's bumper hard, causing him pain he'll remember for a long time. The old man tells Arthur there's a way through which he could let his parents know he's alive, but before he can explain further, Arthur is struck with an intense pain that brings him to his knees. The old man reveals that Arthur has inherited a beast's will and urges him to become his disciple, warning that if he doesn't, he might die from the pain.